He, to me, is someone that even if you give him an amazing amount of respect and adulation and thank you, will never get enough for the role he played with Baylor to replace Art Briles in the interim job at Baylor in 2016. We've had him before. Jim Grobe, former Baylor head coach, joins us on SicEm365 Radio. What did you shoot today? What was your round?
Well, I played with my grandson, and I shot 43. And he let me beat him by a stroke. So I'm feeling pretty good about myself.
By the way, what is your handicap now, seriously, in golf? Well, you play at Reynolds Plantation. You've invited me there before. One of these days I'm just going to knock on the front door. But what is your handicap? Is it better now than it was even 2 or 3 years ago?
Well, the invitation's still there, Smokey, but I'll tell you, I'm a 7.4 right now, but I think you still need to give me a couple strokes.
Okay, I will. I just got my update. It's a 6.1, so I will. I'll give you.
Oh, yeah. Good. I like it.
Hey, by the way, Phil Bennett, I spoke with him about something completely different. He happened to call me today about something with a high school coach trying to help him with a job. And I brought up that we had you on today. And I know there were days and times when things were pretty rocky. Do you understand how much Phil Bennett appreciated you?
Well, that goes both ways, David. That guy, I felt so bad for him because he's such a good football coach and a wonderful guy, and we were in such rough times together. But I have total admiration for Phil Bennett and the job that he did, and I've never known anybody that's a better football coach or anybody that works harder than Phil Bennett at getting the kids ready to play.
Coach, this is Paul. I've told people for years the story of your Big 12 media days when you had the job for maybe long enough to get enough polo shirts to take on the trip and had to go to Big 12 media days. And then everyone was kind of coming at you as if you'd been at Baylor for 10 years, and had a lot of the answers to questions. What was that like to have to deal with something when you still hadn't even had opportunities to really know what had gone on or what was going to come in the future?
Well, in the short amount of time that I'd been there, Paul, I'd seen nothing but great kids, great people. I love everything that I, in a short amount of time, had come to know about Baylor was good. And when I got to the media days, it was all about this bad culture at Baylor. And I'd been at Wake Forest, and I thought Wake Forest was a good place to be. And I got to Baylor, and I just saw all the same type things, and I just thought Baylor was a wonderful place. And I get to the media days, and they're talking about this bad culture, and they keep talking about the bad culture, the bad culture, the bad culture. And I finally called them out and said, look, I haven't seen that. That culture that you all are talking about does not exist at Baylor. And so everybody goes absolutely crazy. And I wasn't trying to say that mistakes hadn't been made and some bad things hadn't happened at Baylor, but there was not a culture at Baylor that was bad that I found. And, you're trying to throw a blanket over the whole university and say that everything's bad about Baylor. Well, most of the things that I found at Baylor were fantastic. And so for me, I just ended up from then on having a button heads kind of session with the press every time, because all the things that I was seeing that, of course, they didn't have firsthand knowledge of were good things. I saw all good things about Baylor, and I know there were problems, and I know that some people didn't behave the way they should have, but the majority of the players, I felt so badly for the parents, and so I ended up in a defensive mode right away because I didn't experience the bad culture that everybody was talking about.
Hey, Coach, Craig here. You've been out of the college game since that year at Baylor in 2016. And it's safe to say it's a little bit of a different world in college athletics now, between name, image, likeness, just the way that the season went last year with the COVID-19 causing havoc to schedules and everything. It's just a whole new world out there, the transfer portal. I'm just curious your thoughts on the college game today. Are you glad to not have to be dealing with all these different changes in a way?
Well, I got to be honest with you. I was really glad that I wasn't dealing with the COVID problems that all the coaches were dealing with. I thought that was a nightmare for really everybody. And I thought, my wife Holly, she said, once the season got started and they were trying to play some games, that certainly none of the coaches' jobs would be at risk. And then, a lot of coaches lost their jobs this year in the COVID season, and I thought that was a little bit silly, to be honest. But I do think that was tough, and coaches are dealing with things that I wouldn't want to deal with right now, the transfer portal and all the things that, with the way that things are going as far as, likeness and paying the players and all the kind of things that are going on right now. I will say this, I'm totally in support of student athletes, and I want the kids to be well taken care of. I want them to be able to feel like that they can go to school and play sports and be well taken care of by the universities. But, I started at Ferrum Junior College and I cleaned Garber Hall 15 hours a week. I was on work study. My dad died when I was a junior in high school. And so when I went to Ferrum, I was paying my own way. I was on work study. I was on loans. I was helping clean Garber Hall there at Ferrum for 2 years, 3 or 4 nights a week, and paying my own way to school. When I got a scholarship at the University of Virginia, I thought I died and gone to heaven. Mm-hmm. And so I think a scholarship's a pretty good deal. And somehow we've gotten to the point where we don't feel being on scholarship is worth very much. And I go back to all the kids that are walk-on kids that are paying their own way and playing football just because they love the game. And so I'm coming at it from a different standpoint. I do want to take care of student athletes as much as possible. But I do think that we've kind of lost the focus of being a student athlete right now, and it seems like we're trying to push things on players right now that I'm not sure are going to be great for the game.
Jim, when Grant Teff called you, you've gone over that with us and asked you about Baylor, and you took the job. Was there ever a time, one night, an afternoon, when you woke up in the morning, ever a time where you felt like you'd made a mistake?
Never. It never crossed my mind. What I found, Smokey, when I got there was just this wonderful group of kids and a wonderful university and everybody trying to help as much as they could. And Holly and I had a habit. We'd get up in the morning and we'd walk on campus before I went into work. And we're out on campus at, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning and walking around campus and ROTC's out working out and students are jogging on campus that early in the morning, everybody out before classes got started. And we would have students every morning come by and say, "God bless you, Coach. Thanks for coming and thanks for your help," and all these things. We would go to dinners and we'd get ready to leave the restaurant and students have written a note, "Coach, God bless you. Thanks for coming." And they paid for our dinner. And I've never been in an environment like that before. And so, as tough as it was trying to deal with the problems with the media and trying to get the team ready to play and trying to get some of the things that had happened behind us so we could get through a season were really challenging, but there was never once that I felt like we weren't doing something good.
How hard was it to hold, because you had, the first 6 games was business as usual for Baylor as far as the results go, but once you had that first loss, how could you feel that that thread had been pulled and it was going to be hard to kind of reattach everything?
Well, I think that the biggest problem was, and I understood completely, the coaches wanted to support Coach Browse because they felt like that, even though there had been problems, that nobody had intentionally done anything, to end up with the results, like they had losing the president, losing, athletic director, losing Coach Browse. And so these guys were upset. I mean, they were very upset. They loved Coach Browse and they were very upset. I understood that. And what my main goal was to try to keep the focus on the players. That we had all these players that had never done anything wrong and all these parents that were heartbroken about what was happening, with the team and with the school and with their kids. And so I tried to my main goal was get all the coaches to focus just on taking care of the players, coaching them and putting their arm around them and keeping them going. But as we got a little bit involved in so things outside football, social media and all those kind of things. And it kind of blew up there for a while. We kind of got off track. and lost some games, and of course that never helps. But I do think that we weathered the storm, and by the end of the season, when we got to Boise State in the bowl game, that's when the coaches, I think, had finally figured out, hey, we're not going to be able, through social media or whatever means, going to be able to help coach Browse. And so let's just coach some football. And so the bowl game experience, that time leading up to the bowl game, watching our guys have fun again and just coach football, and the players have fun and just play, practice, enjoy practice, and enjoy being together. And, having a really good outing against Boise State was really, really special. And I think by the end of the season, even though we'd gone over a lot of hurdles and struggled quite a bit, it was really rewarding for me to see the kids actually smiling again and having fun on the sidelines, and the coaches really enjoying just coaching football again.
Wasn't that also imperative in a lot of ways? One, to try to end it on a good note, also with what you wanted to do, but they also, was there a concern that Boise State, if you went in there with some kind of lackadaisical effort during practice, they could embarrass you?
I think that's what everybody expected, Smokey. I think everybody expected us to get our ears pinned back. But I had a great feeling about it. I never thought that the coaches or the players felt any stress. In fact, it was just the opposite. I think we felt like by the time we got to the end of the season, I thought we played pretty good at West Virginia. It was a nasty night and foggy and rainy and cold. And we had the freshman quarterback. Zach was just starting to get his feet up under him, and I had a feeling that we were starting to improve, and our coaches were kind of focused now on just coaching football, and the kids were focused on playing. And that time leading up to Boise State, I just really felt like we were in a great position, because I don't know that Boise State felt this way, but I think most people around the country felt like Boise would wear us out. And I don't think we were more prepared at any time during the season to play a football game than we were for Boise State. And I could just tell that our players were chomping at the bit to play one more game.
And they did.
Yeah, that might have been Zach Smith's, one of his best games just period in college, even with what he did at Tulsa afterward. Katie Cannon had a huge night that night. It was definitely good to see a win. Coach, do you know Dave Aranda at all?
I don't. I've talked to Mac about him, and I know when Mac when he hired him, that he thought he had somebody really, really special, somebody that would be a perfect fit at Baylor. And, off to a rocky start. But, Matt Rule got off to a rocky start. I think anytime you bring a new system in and you're trying to get to know the players and what their capabilities are, it's hard to hit the ground running. But I've heard nothing but great things about Dave Aranda, and I've got a feeling that they're going to get things going again here pretty quick.
And when you have to have that system running again and you have to do it all on Zoom, it's near impossible. I mean, you look around the country, Coach, most of the coaches that their first year that didn't really get to know the players or have spring football all struggled at some point because, whether COVID hit them or not, you just had no continuity. And you can't invent a way to do it in 3 months. This is years and years of coaching, right?
Well, one of the great things I've heard about Dave Aranda is that he's got a really close relationship with the players. And with all the stuff that the coaches were trying to do on Zoom and trying to coach, on the computers and all those kind of things, I think I can't even imagine. My favorite thing to do was to interact with the players face to face and put my arm around their neck and hug them and, kick them in the butt if they weren't doing the right things. But, just that personal relationship. And I think, with all the masks and I think that in itself, just wearing a mask while you're coaching or trying to do things, by Zoom and not having that personal touch. If you're a coach that relies on being really close to your players and getting the best out of your players from a personal relationship, what a nightmare that was to not be able to do that.
Craig mentioned the Boise State game with Zach Smith, but Katie Cannon had a monster game. But there was a time during the season, Coach Browse was not just a coach to him, but like some players, even you've had players, it was almost like his father. And he was, at some times, a little bit difficult and I'll share this story. Phil Bennett said that it was time for him to be disciplined. And Coach Bennett, walked into an offensive staff meeting and said, we're not taking him to Ames, or we're not playing him against Iowa State. And that was a decision you had made as well. How much did that mean to you, and how hard is that when you have to do that?
Well, really and truly, you look at least I did. I looked at the players like they were my own sons. I have two boys, and of course they're grown now. But I looked at the players exactly as if they were my own sons. And at some point, even though it breaks your heart to do it, you have to let them know that their behavior and their attitude, and what you're trying to do is get them ready for life. You're not just trying to win a football game at all costs. And so sometimes you have to make those hard decisions, and you try the best you can to get the guys going in the right direction. And if they just won't go in the right direction, you have to let them know that football is not more important than them personally. And I think that's the message you send, and you send that to the entire team, that hey, if you don't do the right things on and off the field, then football may not be a possibility, and you don't ever want to do that. But at the same time, you kind of feel good about doing those things, especially when you see at the end of the year that the guys come around and finally kind of get it.
Yeah, you won that game, by the way, in Ames, 45-42, rushed for like 800 yards in that game. Paul, Jim Grobe with us, Craig Smoak, David Smoak on SicEm365 Radio. Jim, I hope you don't take this question wrong, but you had a successful career. What you did at Wake Forest and what you've done, there's a reason why that people knew you even well before you took over the job at Baylor. But do you feel like maybe some thought of you as a babysitter and did not legitimize you enough as a coach that year?
Well, I really didn't care about that. One of the things that I wanted to do when I came to Baylor, and Mac told me, and at the time Ian McCall was the athletic director, and Ian told me the same thing, and that if I got there and felt like I needed to bring people in and make changes, that I had the ability to do that. But I had a group of coaches that I assumed, and I had to do this because nobody had charged them with doing anything wrong. I had to realize that these are husbands and dads. They have families. Mm-hmm. These guys are counting on an income, this is their livelihood. So what my only goal when I got there, as far as the coaching staff was concerned, was that unless anybody came to me and had, proof and knew that these coaches had not done what they were supposed to do, I was going to take these coaches and let them try to keep Coach Browse's system intact, because my number one thought there was I wanted to take care of the players, and the way to take care of the players was try to keep things as consistent as possible. I mean, they'd done great things when Coach Browse was there on the football field, and if I could keep things as consistent as possible, and that's keeping the coaches together and trying to let them do their thing. And honestly, there were some things, I got to be as totally honest with you as I can, there were some things there that I didn't agree with, the way we treated the players. As far as, discipline and practices, I thought offensively we were a little, laissez-faire kind of, in practice, where the defensive, Phil really worked those defensive kids really, really hard every day. And I thought at times offensively we weren't as disciplined as we needed to be offensively. But I thought Kendall Browse was one of the best coaches I've ever been around. I thought at times we needed to kind of crack the whip and work these guys a little harder on offense. But at the same time, they'd been so successful in the past, I wasn't going to step in and change a lot of things because the players had gotten used to being coached this way. So I think, maybe you could say I was a little bit of a babysitter, but my number one goal was to try to make sure that the players, they were getting beat up enough by the press. And I felt like that the best way for me to help these players was to try to keep things as status quo as possible. And even though I saw some things that I said, hey, I wouldn't do it that way, at the same time, I felt like for the players, the best thing to do was try to keep things sailing smooth.
I would think that with that staff, and some of them have told me this, that they're pretty much everybody at some point probably had an explosive moment, because we're talking about how personal it became. You're talking about a son-in-law, among others. How did you, it took a special man, and I say that to you. It took a special man to juggle all of that, because you understood what they were going through, what you were trying to do for the players, what you saw yourself and not what people told you. Where did that come from in you growing up? You mentioned your father passed away when you were younger. Where did that come in Jim Grobe, that you became that kind of person?
Well, I think more than anything, Smokey, it's having coached for so long. You know, if you've been around long enough, I've seen coaches that I thought were way too tough on kids and way too tough on the staff, and I've seen coaches that don't care if it snows eggs. So there's somewhere in the middle of that where you can be too soft or you can be too tough, and I've always been kind of a middle-of-the-road guy. And there were times with our coaches where we got nose to nose and disagreed, and then there were times where I had to just kind of put my arms around them and understand that, hey, these guys are really struggling right now. And so there were some rocky times and there were some good times, but more than anything, I really felt like these were guys that thought that they had done things the right way, and obviously at times they didn't. But I thought all of these guys needed to be accepted and kind of. I kind of want to put my arms around them and say, I understand what you're going through, but let's put all of our attention on the players and take care of these players and try to focus on them. And for the most part, we did. There were times when we got sideways a little bit, and like I said, it wasn't all smooth sailing, but I really felt like that these guys were struggling and they needed my help more than me trying to, jump down their throat every day.
Do you sometimes wonder that, and there was a distraction that came right on the eve of you playing in Austin against Texas that blew things up a little bit, and you still had the lead against Texas late in the game and had a couple of opportunities to step on their neck? There was a hasty fumble. Seth tripped up going into the end zone. Do you sometimes wonder how long that unbeaten season could have continued had you won that game at Austin?
That's one of my toughest losses as a coach. And as I said, there were some things that I would have done differently as a coach, but I tried to keep things status quo as much as possible. And that was a week that we let slip away. I mean, that's a time where we really and truly could have won a game had we been more focused. I felt like that, of all the tough losses that I've had in my career, I thought the loss at Texas was probably the toughest one I've had.
Jim Grobe with us, former Baylor coach on SicEm365 Radio. Paul?
Coach, how many players from Baylor do you speak with just semi-regularly?
Well, I talked with some of the guys, back when I first left. Some of the guys were talking about transferring. They just felt like they wanted to get a new start. And a couple of players, really good players that called me and wanted my advice. And of course, at that time, all I cared about was the players' well-being. And I encouraged them to stay at Baylor. I told them, I said, there's no better place for you to be. And Matt Rule had a great reputation coming in. I thought Matt was going to do a great job. I think he had a great staff. And some of these guys were kind of star players that, were thinking about leaving. And so, that's the kind of discussions we had. Should I stay? Should I go? All of them ended up staying. I asked all of them, how many friends do you have on the football team? And they were friends with everybody on the football team. I said, well, why would you go start all over again trying to make friends and fit in when you're already fitting? And they were worried about the coaching staff. Mm-hmm. And I promised them that Matt Rule would come in and do a great job, and he did that. And they ended up staying, and I felt really good about that for them and for Baylor. I haven't had a lot of contact with them lately, but most of my guys are gone. I came back, and I've tried to come back every year, and Mac Rhodes has been wonderful to me. Every time I've come back, he's gone overboard to make me feel welcome. And, at that, I saw some kids in the lobby. I stayed at the same hotel the kids were at. And now all those guys have moved on and done other things, so those guys are gone now. But not a lot of contact with the guys right now. I'm always available. I have kids from time to time will call me and they have job opportunities and need recommendations, things like that. And I do that all the time.
Phil Bennett had been talking to Baylor about the head coaching job when there was the transition. He didn't want it because they also wanted him to do some things and may have even asked you to do some things as well. And when Grant Teaff called him, apparently Phil Bennett told me he had visited Wake Forest at some point. And I don't know where he was at the time, but he had visited the campus. I believe you might have been there. I don't know. But he kind of loved what he saw. And so when your name was brought up by Grant Teaff, what do you think about Jim Grobe? Coach Bennett says his quote was, "He's the guy, he can do it." Did he ever share that with you?
Well, yeah, and Coach Teaff shared that with me. And, the thing I felt so bad about was Phil would have been a wonderful guy to be the coach. I mean, he would have been a wonderful head. He did a great job at SMU, did a wonderful job at SMU. And I thought that I felt bad for Phil because he really and truly, had they named him the head coach, would have done a wonderful job. The problem was he was tied to Art. And had you named one of the assistants, I think the problems would have been multiplied because now you're trying to support Coach Browse, and everybody says, well, yeah, no wonder you're going to support Coach Browse. You're Art Browse guy. So I felt like it was a situation where Phil would have done a wonderful job. There's nobody I respect more in coaching or as a man than Phil Bennett. But I do think it would have been really tough on Baylor to promote from within when supposedly the problems were with Art Browse and his staff. So I thought that would have been really tough, but I felt so bad because I know Phil Bennett would have done a great job with that football team, probably better than I did. But the environment, it's very similar to me fighting the press all year long. And I shouldn't say fight, but defending the things that I found that were good at Baylor, trying to defend those things on a regular basis. When Mack Rhodes got the job, let me tell you, there's nobody I respect more in athletics than Mack Rhodes. I think he's as good as it gets. And when he came in as the athletic director, I was absolutely sick that I couldn't stay on at Baylor because I thought Mack Brown would be the most wonderful guy to work for. I would have given anything to stay with Mack, but I told Mack, you need a clean slate. I've been defending Baylor for a whole season and trying to stand up for all the good things about Baylor. And it would be best in Baylor's best interest to have somebody come in fresh like Matt Rule. I talked to Matt Rule for a long time before he actually visited and decided to take the job. And I told him, there's not anything that I didn't like about Baylor. And so I was so tickled when Matt took the job, but I felt like that they needed a fresh start. They needed to get everything behind them. And of course, Matt was able to do that because he came in and had great discipline with the players and great reputation, great respect, and did all the good things. But I couldn't tell you, I can't say anything. I can't speak highly enough about Mack Rhodes and the job that he's done.
You mentioned that you were kind of almost not influenced, but there was a chance that there were maybe some pressure that some of the staff had to go. Was there ever an ultimatum and you just said no?
No, there never was. And I think mainly Smokey, because nobody had come out with any individual coach and said, this guy's violated rules, this guy's circumvented the university, this guy has done things that he shouldn't do. It was never brought up about any coach. And when I went in there, I was very honest in that if I found wrongdoing, those coaches would be gone. Mm-hmm. I had no problems doing that. Honestly, it would have been easier for me to go in and just bring a whole staff with me. I mean, that would have been the easiest thing to do. People that knew me, people that would that I was associated with, that I knew were great coaches and great people. That would have made my job so much easier. But that wouldn't have been better for the players. And I felt like, especially if I was just going to be there to get Baylor through a season, the best thing I could do was go in there and have an open mind, try to take the coaches that had not been accused of wrongdoing, try to take those guys and mold that staff together to help the players. And then if I found wrongdoing, I had no problems making changes. But the whole time I was there, nobody ever accused any individual coach of wrongdoing.
Here's one final quote, Jim, and we can't thank you enough for being a part of it. What he inherited was a bunch of butthurt coaches. He handled it like no other. I will go to my grave what he did for me and what he did for Baylor in the 1 year he was there. And that was about Jim Grobe.
Well, I got to tell you that one of my great experiences in coaching, Smokey, was to be at Baylor and to help those kids and help those coaches, and not only the coaches and the players, but the parents of those kids and Baylor University get through that season. And so as tough as that was, it really probably, I've told Holly this before, but even though we went through a lot of tough times, I don't think I've ever had a more rewarding year in my whole coaching career than the year that I spent at Baylor. It wasn't easy. It was tough. My relationship with Mike Rhodes was fabulous. We immediately connected, and we worked together to get through that season. But it was probably the most rewarding year I've ever spent in coaching. And the people, J-Mo was great. John Morris helped me through that season with doing the games, and our nights at the barbecue place were really good. He did a great job. My relationship with Mike Sims, our trainer, was fantastic. I mean, I just go through all the wonderful people. Carly Hefner, who was our administrative assistant, that helped get me through. Nick Joes, who went to all the press conferences with me and kind of kept me coached up and all that. But I look back, Holly and I both look back, and I think I've helped a lot of kids and a lot of programs through the years. But probably the most rewarding season that I've ever gone through was, even though it was as tough as it was our year at Baylor.
Jim, I promise you one day I'm going to take you up on that Reynolds plantation. Last year, COVID blew that up. I would love to come visit with you just to say hi and not have to talk about anything else but just life. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you.
Smokey, appreciate you. Y'all be good.
Thank you. That's Jim Grobe, former Baylor head coach on SicEm365 Radio. There's all sorts of quotes that I got from some former people on staff about what he did. There was an explosion constantly. There was always something, either something that was in the media or something just within, and how he handled that without ego, without wait a minute, you heard what he said. It's no matter at times some of those coaches that didn't like him because he wasn't Coach Briles, how all of them in the end realized what he actually did for them that year.
You know why? Because it was never for 1 second about Jim Grobe.
Never. Never
once. 1 second. He knew none of this is about me. This is not about my life. This is not about anything. This is what I can do to help. And he had a service-minded attitude, and that's why he'll never get enough credit for what I think was the hardest year many coaches will ever have to.
I know we got to take a couple of breaks before Craig and off the radar. The KD Cannon story. He was acting up. He was out of control when it comes to his, his demeanor, his personality, whatever. And they decided it was time that they had to show him something. Maybe it was too late. So they're about to go play Iowa State, and Grobe and Phil Bennett had talked about this. Bennett walked into an offensive coaches meeting. I'm sure we know who they were, and said, he's not making the trip, and if any of you don't like the decision, find a better attitude. And then Grobe walked in, made the decision, or mentioned it. He didn't play. They won 45-42, ran for Shock Linwood went crazy. So that's an interesting behind-the-scenes story. Coming up next, a note or